Greetings, Paper Demons. Welcome to Paper Demons video series on art school. So this video is going to be kind of a different format than what we usually do on this channel. We're going to do, this is kind of like a podcast style where we're just going to discuss and share some stories and, personal experience and advice. So let us know in the comments what you think about this new format. We've got a series of videos planned around this topic that'll be coming out. So stay tuned. Definitely hit the subscribe button so you can get notified when we have a new one. Okay, on with the show. In today's video, we're going to discuss whether an art degree is worth it, as well as the burnout that you can get from pursuing an art degree. Today, I am joined by Shyftlock.
Hello.
Who is a game designer and content writer for the PaperDemon art RPG. And coincidentally, both of us attended the same art program at San Jose State University. So we have opinions that we would really like to share. And we'd like to share them because we both kind of experienced burnout when going through art school. And we really wanted to share our story and our experience with that as a warning sign for the others who may be thinking about attending art school or who may already be attending art school. Because the consequences of art burnout and school burnout are significant. So I think it's worth it for us to talk about this important topic.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been something that's been super important to me for quite a few years at this point, since, once you start hitting burnout, it can be a several-year journey to get out of it. It really wildly varies, but school is such a rigid environment and lasts for such a long time that it does have a very high risk of having that long-term burnout effect if you're not able to catch it early enough.
I myself experienced it as well. Going through school, I nearly dropped out university because I was really struggling toward the end. First, I'd like to define what burnout is, since some people may not be familiar with the term. So if we're looking at mayoclinic.org, they have a page here about job burnout. And even though we're talking about school burnout, it's still pretty much the same thing as job burnout. But it says on this page here that I'm looking at about burnout, the following risk factors may contribute to job burnout. 1, you have a heavy workload with long work hours. 2, you struggle with work-life balance. 3, you work in a helping profession such as healthcare. And 4, you feel you have little or no control over your work. I'd say 3 out of 4 of those would be applicable.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, at least you could make an argument for helping professions depending on exactly what you're doing with your art. But generally, school with the rigid structure of classes, coursework, homework, and everything, tons and tons of work that you need to do both in class and outside of class. When you have a regular job, you don't typically take it home. In some cases, that's not true, but with school, you go to class all day long, and then you come home and you have more school. And then work-life balance also applies there. You have school and you have the rest of your entire life up to and including another entire job. And school is generally a very rigid environment when it comes to assignments, so you don't usually get to pick what you're working on as you're going through these classes in this entire 4-year to 6-year to 8-year, depending on what kind of process you're going through this procedure to get your degree.
I remember that the courses for art classes would be twice as long as in length for sitting in class compared to other classes like history or English or whatever. Like those courses would be a standard 3 units and last an hour and 15 minutes or something twice a week. But the art classes, which were also 3 units, would last 3 hours twice a week. Mm-hmm. So you're spending a lot more time in the classroom, and the amount of homework is a lot. It is a lot. So many times I remember students telling me that they pulling all-nighters just to get homework done for art classes.
Yeah, absolutely. I personally resolved to never pull all-nighters and did my absolute best to design my schedule to avoid that, and I still ended up having to pull one or two during that time period while I was at school, because there was just absolutely no possible way that I could get all of that work done within the time period I was given to get it done.
Yeah, I didn't do too many all-nighters. I think I only did like a small handful of them because yeah, like, for me like sleep is one of the most important things for my mental health. I feel physically ill if I don't get sleep. So I usually would try not to pull all-nighters.
So, in the program that both Bogus and I went through, the first year during my time at that school was deliberately designed to weed out people who were, quote, not dedicated enough or didn't fit the enthusiasm threshold for what they wanted in the program. The way that this was designed was that the first years were required to take 3 different classes. All 3 of them were studio classes, so they were all ones that, ran for the 3 hours. And all of those studio classes sent you home with an enormous amount of homework, to the point where there was several times where, I got out of class, I went home, I did homework, and that was literally the only thing that I was able to do besides, if I was lucky, eating and sleeping until that assignment was due. So the way that it was designed was not necessarily to help you find your passion and help you explore and learn it, whether or not this was right for you. It was basically a mock-up of Studio Crunch. So a mock-up of the absolute worst periods of time in a job in this arena, and it was done deliberately because they have a certain expectation for the students going through this program, and they want to make sure everyone is actually meeting those expectations. It's also a very impacted program. There's a lot of people applying and not a lot of space to put them, so they have incentive to try and cut down their class size so that they can cram in as many people as they can, and make sure those people are actually going to stay through the entire program, instead of dropping out in 2 years when they decide that their true passion is actually nursing or something. So this was a very, very difficult thing to go through. I imagine even more so for high school students, since I was a transfer student. I had already had some time in college. It was another state university, so it wasn't quite the level of community college, but those state university classes that I was doing prior to moving to this program were, just average classes. You would spend your hour and 15 minutes in that class. You would get maybe like an hour of homework at the end of each class on average.
These were like general ed classes?
Yeah, general ed. There was. I was also in the honors program for the school I was at prior to being involved in this university. So they were actually some of the most intensive GE programs available in that college. And I did some major work there as well, and those major classes were very, very differently constructed from the classes in this program that you and I both went to.
The major classes were different?
Yes. Yeah. So we were learning, the same thing. We were learning art. But the way that the major classes at that school were structured were much slower paced, and the amount of homework that they sent you home with was very feasible. You could absolutely get it done in a reasonable amount of time. There was never any worry that I had getting that done before the next class time. And while I do think those classes would have benefited from being a little bit more intensive, they were actually manageable through the lens of, these are college students. These are people who probably at least have to have a part-time job, may also be working full-time. The people going to college generally have lives outside of college. So the way those classes were formatted made living outside of college a lot easier. Like, I never had to worry about getting enough sleep. I never had to worry about putting physical strain on my body in order to get through these classes. And that was just something that completely evaporated when I moved to that other program.
Yeah, I want to talk more about the fitting in work-life balance and that kind of thing in a second, but I want to go back to what you said about how the program at San Jose State, in their animation illustration program, which, sorry, we didn't give you the full context, but the program we went through was specifically for animation and illustration. And you mentioned that it seemed like it was designed to be like a studio crunch time type thing. And that's very interesting that you mentioned that, because I never really thought of it that way, but that makes a lot of sense. It's like, hey, we're trying to make this environment mimic what it would be like in a real job as much as possible. And I have to say, like, I don't want to go into a job that's like this. Hell no. This is not sustainable. So you're gonna like burn us out before we even get our first job? Like, what sense does that make?
Yeah, that structure at the animation program was a major factor in me choosing my career trajectory after college. So partway through that program, I realized, if my job in real life is going to be like what this school is like, I don't want that job. So I, at that point, decided I wasn't going to apply to those AAA studios. I wasn't going to get one of those, dream jobs working on a major video game franchise, because to me personally, it wasn't worth sacrificing my health and well-being and happiness in order to work on something really cool.
100%.
I knew that there was an opportunity to work on other cool things without having to sacrifice my actual health. And that's how I ended up working with you.
Yeah, I actually kind of came to similar conclusions. When I first went into the program, I wanted to work in the gaming industry. I wanted to work for video games. Mainly I wanted to work for Nintendo, which was never going to happen anyway. But around the time that I was in, there was a lot of controversy going around in the news with Electronic Arts, where they were making their employees work like ridiculous hours. I don't know if it was like 80 hours a week or something crazy. People who had families could never see their spouses and their kids, and the spouses were getting really upset, and there was lawsuits and stuff about it. Like it was big in the news at the time that I was attending. Yeah, I kind of came to a similar conclusion, like, okay, I love video games, but I do not want to work in that industry, because the amount of work that they expect you to work, and they don't compensate you for those extra hours either, it is not worth it for me. I did not want to go into that. So I don't think I applied to a single gaming studio. I pretty much just only applied to tech jobs.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. I applied to one or two studios, but the ones that I selected specifically because the type of work I would be doing in that position would be work that I could tolerate, having more pressure about. So I wasn't necessarily, every single studio ever is going to send out the recruiters, and their recruiters are not going to tell you, yeah, we crunch all the time, it sucks. Right. Yeah. So I was going into any job application that I sent to a game studio, I was taking some time to research the culture of the studio, but not take anything public at face value, and go in with the understanding that, I would not be able to avoid crunch in this entire job arena. And because I was only applying to one or two places, maybe a few more than that, I didn't ever get any responses to those resumes, which was honestly a huge blessing because I could not possibly be happier than where I'm at right now, because the way that we design our work process specifically is meant to avoid hitting all of these burnout check marks.
I'm so glad that you're here at PaperDemon too, because we've very much benefited from your expertise with art RPG game mechanics and all of your creative ideas around ideas for portals for our game and everything. So we're super excited to have you on our staff, and I could talk all day about how amazing Shy is. So were talking about how, like, when you were in school, you were trying to also work a job. I didn't really work that much while I was in school because, as a person with ADHD, I had that diagnosed pretty early. My mom knew, like, I could not manage a job and school at the same time. She's like, you need to just focus on school. And I'm like, okay. I lived at home. I didn't live on campus. I didn't have extra living expenses since my school was local. I was born and raised in San Jose and went to San Jose State, so it's right there. Did have to commute, which certainly added a lot of time, taking public transit and stuff. But yeah, I tried not to work too much. But of course, I was in a privileged position where I financially was able to do that, and there's a lot of students who don't have that ability. They have to cover their living expenses. So it definitely creates a huge barrier for anyone who is not financially able. It's incredibly difficult to get through a program like this that requires so much out of you.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a short period of time in the middle where I was living on my own, but most of my time in college, I was living with family. I had very, very good financial aid, and it was really only the last semester or two of college that I was working a job at the same time I was doing classes, and it was incredibly difficult, and both my health and my studies suffered from that. At that point, I was in a senior thesis program, and my thesis advisor was absolutely incredible and very understanding, and let me get away with murder. I I definitely got a lot of forgiveness in that, and I think that without that, I probably wouldn't have hit the threshold to be able to graduate during that time period, just because I was so stressed out. I was so overworked. I did not want to touch any art-related anything. It just made me actively miserable to have to sit down and draw or paint or 3D model anything. So that was the point where it just hit the end of the rope for me with art, and that was really the last time I did art actively, when I was required to for that senior thesis. After that, I really stopped doing art. Since, it's been two and a half years since then, and I'm only just slowly starting to get to the point where I can convince myself to pick up a pencil again.
That's really tragic. A lot of people go into the art profession out of a love and a passion for it, and to come out of it losing that passion and to actually actively feel like bad when you're trying to do art it's really heartbreaking to hear that. And I know that others have felt that too going through this program. And one of the things that I wanted to kind of add in here too was it wasn't just like the regular coursework that you were expected to do within these classes. You were also expected to do additional figure drawing every week for some of the courses. So there would be your regular assignments, but then on top of that, you had to do figure drawing, which is great for building up your skills. But the expectation was that you had to come on campus and attend a live model posing for the figure studies. I think it was like maybe twice a week you had to go. I don't remember if it was once or twice, but for someone like me who didn't live on campus, this was a lot to ask. Also at the time when I was there, a lot of the animation work, you had to be on campus to do it, or at least to shoot it, because we had to use these, they called them a lunchbox. This is super old school. Everything's digital now. If you have the equipment at home, you can certainly do it at home. But back then, these were very expensive things that most people didn't have. And you had to It was a rigged up with this lunchbox thing where you press this button to record a snapshot of what the camera sees, and if you wanted to take a frame out or add a frame in, you had to record the whole thing over again. Again, now with technology, that's all completely different and it's a lot simpler. But the point is, you had to be on campus outside of classroom hours to go in and record your animations and everything and make edits to it. And it was an overwhelming amount of work. It was hard. And it's sad too, because like when you tell people that you're majoring in art, they think, oh, you're doing you're going the easy route. Art's easy. It's like the hardest thing you can go through. It was so hard. I don't know how we survived it. It took me 6 years to get through the program. I was also fortunate that my professors were very understanding in the senior year, because I did finally, I had a job lined up before I graduated. The last summer I was a student, I had an internship and it led to a permanent position. So I was working full time in my last semester, pretty much. So my teachers were like, oh, you have a job. You did what you needed to do, so we're just going to kind of let you skate by, which I'm very grateful for. But if it wasn't for that, like, it would have been really hard to get through that final year, being as burnt out as I was and having to create like a masterpiece at the end. Yeah, I feel so tired just thinking about it. I really feel tired right now just thinking about it. Like it was really, really rough. Let's spend some time talking about what happens at the end. Like, okay, you've spent the 6 years to get through this 4-year degree program and you come out of it burnt out. You made it through this really hard program. You have the skills to pay the bills, but you have an art block coming out of it because you're making art is like the last thing you want to do. Like, all your passion and drive for art is just gone. Any love that you had for it is gone. Shai had said to me when we were first throwing around the outline for this episode that it felt like a hollow victory.
Yeah, it really did. So I graduated in 2020, so it was when the pandemic happened. I didn't have a graduation ceremony. There was no actual go out with a bang anything, even like the symbolic part of it with the, the walking the stage or anything. So I kind of just, finished my classes and that was it. It felt very, very empty. It felt like it didn't feel like I'd accomplished anything. It kind of just felt like, classes are over. What do I do now? I had, working with you lined up, which was absolutely incredible. But going into that, in the beginning when I started working with PaperDemon, I was also on the list as one of our artists. And all of the art that you assigned me took forever to do. It would take me like months to get through those assignments that in reality only took a handful of hours, just because it stressed me out so badly to have to open those art programs. And I was so scared about how terrible my art was going to look. I was just, it was just wildly stressful, it just made me think of, being trapped in that endless loop of homework. And it got to the point where, I had that conversation with you where I just said, I'm sorry, but I can't do art for this job. You have to put me on non-art work. Because I can't do it. And it's not a physical can't do it. That's a whole different discussion. But it's just that psychological and emotional block was not even surmountable with, the pressure of having job expectations and I'm getting paid for this, and people are waiting on this asset. That didn't help. The pressure did not help push me past that block. It just made it worse.
Yeah, it's a huge disservice to the students to be so focused on the skills and not thinking about the mindset, because the mindset is incredibly important. I think artists are very much susceptible to blocks. As creative people, I think in other professions it doesn't happen as much as in creative professions, and I think that it's just really tragic to have so many students go through a program like this, work them so hard, build up their skills so much, and then have them come out feeling like they're failures. And part of the reason why it upsets me is because I know that it's not just us. When I got out of the program, I was hired at Google, and I became a Google doodler. And there was a point when we were hiring more doodlers, and we went to San Jose State to talk with the seniors to see if we could hire some new grads to come in to the team. And I was surprised at how the students really had great skill, but lacked an incredible amount of confidence. Like, they were very hard on themselves. So it's not just us that experienced that. And I remember too, when I was in the program towards the end, I felt like I was the worst student in the class. Like, I thought my art was the worst out of all of them. Now, looking back,
felt that too.
That may not have actually been true. That may have just been my own perception. Because we were trained so hard to look for every mistake and fix everything. We were kind of almost trained to be perfectionists, which, there is some benefit to being able to self-critique and, have some criticism of your work in order to grow. You have to be able to see where your faults are so you can improve. But I think it was done to such an extreme that it really eroded our self-confidence, and that's what kind of led to an art block for a lot of students, I think.
Yeah. That was a little bit less of a factor for me. I definitely had that challenge in the beginning, but I think for me personally, that one was the easiest one to train myself off of because I'm so immersed in art communities. I spend a lot of time in communities where, it's not full of professional artists. It's full of people who are there because they're passionate about it, because they love it, because this is a new thing that's been introduced to their lives, and they just, want to keep on doing it more and more. Being in those communities gave me that lens where it's like, okay, wait, I'm on par with other professional artists. A lot of these amateur artists are amateur artists. They haven't had that art education. They haven't had 10 plus years, 20 plus years dedicated to learning this craft. So being around lower skilled artists gave me that huge boost of self-confidence to get myself to the point where it's like, no, it's not the fact that my art sucks that's the problem. My art does not suck. Something else is the problem here.
So one of the reasons that we're talking about this topic is as a arts community, we have a lot of people who are neurodiverse. And I think a program like this that is really intense, it can be very difficult for people who are neurodiverse. As a person with ADHD, it was quite difficult to get through a program like this. I had accommodations when I was in school. Even with accommodations, it can still be really challenging to get through a program like this. So if you are considering going into the arts as a profession and want to get an education, just kind of be mindful that some of these programs can be pretty intense. You may want to go through them slower if you do want to go through them at all, or find alternative means of getting your education. There are definitely pros and cons to going to a university versus like getting an arts education elsewhere, like through, piecemeal through courses and stuff. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that in upcoming videos. We definitely have more things to say on this topic about art school. So if you want to hear more, we are going to do another video. We're going to talk about, just to kind of give you some sneak peeks here. So our upcoming videos, we're going to talk a little bit more about anti-anime, how school is anti-anime. So if you want to hear us talk more about the dangers of art school, definitely hit subscribe and give this video a like. And we will release another video talking about those topics. Shai, you got anything else you want to add?
Yeah, just one thing looping back to the neurodivergency. If you struggle with issues stemming from neurodivergency, anything in that range, be it long term, be it temporary, schools do have accommodations that they can give you. You can talk to people at the school to get those accommodations. The process depends on the school that you're going to. So you're going to have to do some research on that yourself. But they will provide tools to support you through that. It is going to depend a little bit on the specific professors. But with that, communication really, really is key. You don't necessarily need to be giving them a whole bunch of personal details, but you need to be keeping them up to date on what you can and cannot do. Because that's always going to be better than just going radio silent and not turning in assignments. You have to keep up with communication if you want to go through these programs when you're having some severe difficulties. That's extremely, extremely important.
Yeah, Shy, I definitely agree. If you do have a disability of some kind, and even if you don't consider it a disability, if it's listed as a disability, if you're in the United States and if you've got something like ADHD, that is technically under the legal terms considered a disability, and you are therefore entitled to certain accommodations at your university. And this is, it doesn't matter what university is, you are by law entitled to those. So I do encourage you to seek those out, and you do not have to disclose the details of that to your professors. That's something that gets disclosed to administrative people at the school that then help to make arrangements for your accommodations. I myself have gone through that. I'd love to talk more about that, but we're kind of out of time in this video, so hopefully we'll cover that in a future one. Thanks for joining us again. Hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video where we're going to talk more about is an art degree worth it and the dangers you should know.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye-bye.
Do you like to draw? Play the PaperDemon Art RPG. Draw your original characters on adventures through the Paperverse. Every drawing earns you loot and XP. Join forces with your friends to defeat monsters and art block. Register your character today.